Dad told me to watch you. That's what my 8-year-old son whispered to me in the dark, while I was tucking him into bed on an ordinary Sunday night. In March. For words. That's all it took to make the floor of my whole life tilt sideways. A few seconds earlier, none of this had seemed like it was coming. Eli had just gotten out of the bath, hair still damp. Against his forehead, the ends curling the way they always did. When he was too impatient for a full towel dry, he burrowed under his dinosaur comforter the way he'd burrowed under it. Every night since he was 4 years old, the same soft green fabric worn thin at the edges from years of clutching. "Mom," he'd said, voice small against the pillow. "Can I tell you something, but you can't be mad?" I laughed a little, the automatic sound of a mother who has heard every variation of that question. I told him nothing he ever said could make me mad at him, the way I'd told him 100 times before about spilled juice on the living room rug, about bad spelling tests he tried to hide in his backpack, about the time he flushed a rubber duck down the toilet just to see what would happen and then stood in the hallway looking both terrified and fascinated. This time his eyes didn't relax the way they usually did when I said that. They got wider instead. Scared, almost. The kind of scared that makes a child's shoulders draw up toward his ears. Then came the 4 words. And then, before I could even fully process them, for more that were somehow worse, he said, "It's a secret." He said, "I'm not supposed to tell you. I want to be honest with you." I did not understand, in that first moment, how much my life was about to change. For one stupid, forgivable second, I actually thought it was some harmless thing his father had said in passing, the kind of joke a divorced dad might make trying to still feel like part of a life he no longer lived inside of. "Watch me do what, buddy?" I asked, smiling, trying to keep the moment light. "Fold laundry? Load the dishwasher?" Eli didn't smile back. He pulled the comforter up to his chin and looked at me with an expression I had never once seen on his face before that night, sitting there on the edge of his bed, in the same house I'd tucked him into 1,000 times under the same glow-in-the-dark stars we'd stuck to the ceiling. Together when he was 5, I realized something had shifted in our lives that I couldn't yet name. I had no idea that night just how far it was actually going to go. To understand why that sentence hit me the way it did, you have to understand where Eli and I were that particular March. My name is Rachel Bennett now, though for 9 years I was Rachel Kessler, married to a man named Mark Ide. Met my sophomore year at Appalachian State, in a dining hall line of all the unremarkable places to meet the person you'll build a whole life with. He was ahead of me, balancing a tray with 2 slices of pizza and a mountain of salad he never finished. I dropped my fork. He picked it up. That was the whole origin story. We started talking about a shared class neither of us liked, then about hiking trails near campus, then about everything else. We were married 3 years later in a small outdoor ceremony under a rented tent that leaked when it rained halfway through the vows. We laughed about it. We thought laughter would always be enough. We had Eli 6 years into the marriage. For a long while, on paper at least, we looked fine. 2 steady jobs, a little bungalow in Dilworth we'd stretched hard to afford, a kid who loved dinosaurs so intensely he insisted on being called Rex for most of 1st grade and once tried to convince his teacher that Rex was a legitimate middle name. What I didn't see for longer than I'd like to admit was how much strain was building underneath all of it. Mark and I fought about money more than 2 people with good jobs should ever have had to. I never fully understood why, at the time. I told myself it was just stress, the ordinary friction of 2 working parents trying to keep a household running. I did not know the fights were a symptom of something much bigger Mark was hiding from me. Completely. I'll get to that. We separated when Eli was 6, and the divorce was finalized about 1.5 years before that March night. It wasn't a screaming, dish-throwing kind of ending. It was quieter than that, and in its own way sadder. 2 people who'd simply stopped being able to reach each other, working things out. Through mediation instead of a courtroom fight, dividing a shared life into two separate ones with careful lists of furniture, and bank accounts and weekend schedules. I kept the house. Mark moved into an apartment off North Tryon up near University City, a place with beige walls and a parking lot that always smelled faintly of someone else's cooking. We landed on joint legal custody, with Eli living with me full-time and spending every other weekend with his dad, plus Wednesday dinners. The week the paperwork cleared, I went back to my maiden name. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken in 2 years. By that March, I'd rebuilt something I was genuinely proud of. I worked as an HR manager at a regional bank up in Uptown Charlotte. Steady hours, good benefits, the kind of job that let me be home for dinner most nights and still make it to school, plays, and science fairs. Eli was in 3rd grade at his elementary school a few blocks from our house, doing great in math. Terrified of the class hamster for reasons he refused to explain. Inseparable from a kid named Marcus who lived 2 streets over and whose mother sometimes texted me photos of the 2 of them building elaborate cardboard forts in the backyard. Our little corner of Dilworth had a rhythm to it, walking to get ice cream on East Boulevard on Friday nights when the weather was good, pancakes on Saturday mornings when he was with me, a bedtime routine of bath, 2 books, 1 song. Lights out, that we had protected fiercely through the whole divorce, because it was one of the only things that hadn't changed for him. I'm telling you all of this so you understand exactly what normal looked like for us. So you understand exactly how much that one whispered sentence broke it open. I didn't yell. I don't think I even reacted much on the outside, though my heart was going hard enough that I could feel it in my ears, a thick, insistent pulse. I've spent enough time around kids' Sunday school when I was younger, 2 seasons, coaching Eli's t-ball team, to know that the second you show fear or anger, a child shuts the door and you don't get back in for a long while. So I kept my voice as soft and level as I could manage, even with my hands shaking under the comforter where he couldn't see them. You're not in any trouble, baby, I told him. I promise you. That? Can you tell me what Dad said? Eli chewed his bottom lip, the way he does when he's deciding whether something is safe to say out loud. His freckles stood out darker against the pale of his cheeks in the low light from the hallway. Then, slowly, in pieces, it came out. His dad had sat him down the Friday before, in the car on the way home from Chick-fil-A, the smell of waffle fries still in the air, and told him they were starting a secret spy game, just the 2 of them. Eli's job was to keep an eye on things at Mom's house. He was supposed to look around my home office when I wasn't in the room. He was supposed to notice who came by to visit. If he ever saw important-looking papers on my desk, he was supposed to take pictures of them on an old phone his dad had given him with no SIM card, nothing but a camera. And if he ever heard me talking to a lawyer, he was supposed to tell his dad the very next time he saw him. He said I couldn't tell you, Eli said, and his voice cracked on the last word. He said it was our secret. But I don't like secrets from you, Mom. I don't. I asked him, as gently as I knew how, whether his dad had told him why he wanted all of this. What Eli said next is the part that still keeps me up some nights, even now. He said if I helped, maybe we could all live together again. Like before. An 8-year-old boy, using his own private hope of putting his broken family back together as the reason to spy on his mother, for a father who, I would learn over the following weeks, had no intention whatsoever of reconciling with me. That was the bait. Not a toy. Not money. His own oldest wish turned into a tool. I want to tell you I stayed composed after that. I mostly did for his sake. I told Eli he had done absolutely nothing wrong, that grown-up problems were never, ever a kid's job to solve, and that he could always tell me the truth no matter what anyone else told him to do. I sang him his song, the same silly, made-up one about a dinosaur who learned to share that I'd been singing since he was a toddler. I turned off his light. Then, I walked into my bathroom, sat down on the edge of the tub, and cried into a hand towel so he wouldn't hear me through the wall. The tile was cold under my bare feet. The towel smelled like the laundry detergent we both used. I pressed it hard against my mouth and let the sound stay there. But that wasn't even the hardest part of that night. Once Eli was finally asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I never drank, the steam rising and then disappearing, replaying the last few months like a movie I was suddenly watching with the lights turned on. Things I had walked right past started rearranging themselves in front of me, one at a time. A few weeks earlier, completely out of nowhere at the dinner table, Eli had asked me if I was going to sell our house. I'd laughed and told him no, silly, why would you think that? He'd shrugged and gone back to his mac and cheese, and I hadn't thought about it again until that night. Another time, a couple months before, he'd asked, almost clinically, for an 8-year-old whether I had a boyfriend, and when I said no, he'd followed up with, "Are you sure? Not even someone who comes over sometimes." I remember thinking it was funny, the kind of thing a kid picks up from some show about parents dating again. I understood now those hadn't been Eli's questions at all. They'd been questions funneled through Eli. There was also a Tuesday about a month before when I'd come home from the grocery store and found my home office door open. Nothing alarming on its own. Eli sometimes wandered in there for drawing paper or to borrow a stapler for some elaborate craft project, except the little tray on my desk, where I kept old mail and bills, was angled slightly differently than I normally leave it. I noticed it, the way you notice 100 small things a day and let it go. And then there was Mark himself. At drop-offs over the past couple of months, he'd started making small talk that, at the time, felt almost like progress, like maybe we really could become the kind of divorced parents who got along fine. How's work going? Everything good, money-wise? You seeing anyone these days? I answered honestly every time, because why wouldn't I? He was still Eli's father, and I had nothing to hide. Sitting at my kitchen table with cold tea in front of me, I understood I hadn't been making small talk with an ex trying to be friendly. I'd been debriefed casually at my own front door over and over, and I'd never once noticed. None of it on its own would have meant a single thing. Laid out together at 11 o'clock at night, it looked exactly like what it was. Reconnaissance. I still didn't know why. That was the part that scared me most. Mark and I had our issues, plenty of them, but not once in 9 years of marriage or 2 years of divorce had he ever struck me as someone capable of using our son as a hidden camera. I told myself there had to be some explanation that made this smaller than it felt. I was wrong. It turned out to be so much bigger. The explanation started arriving 2 days later, and it did not make anything smaller. It came as a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, a 704 area code like everyone else in Charlotte, but not one saved anywhere in my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't. The woman on the line introduced herself as a fraud verification specialist with a lending company I had never done business with in my life, and asked to confirm details on a home equity line of credit application filed the week before under my name against my address. I told her as calmly as I could manage, with my pulse suddenly roaring in my ears, that I had never applied for anything with her company or any company, not that week, not ever. There was a pause on the line, the particular kind of pause you learn to dread, the kind that means the person on the other end is checking a screen and finding something that doesn't match. Then she told me the application had listed my name, my property, and a co-applicant listed as my spouse. I did not have a spouse. I had an ex-husband. She couldn't share every detail. She kept using the phrase, per our fraud protocol, but she confirmed enough. The application had come in with a signature attributed to me, notarized, requesting a substantial line of credit against the house Mark and I had jointly owned during our marriage. The house that, under our divorce settlement, was supposed to be entirely mine. The house whose refinance the one meant to remove Mark's name from the original mortgage completely had hit a snag a few months earlier over a low appraisal, a hiccup my lawyer had assured me was nothing but paperwork and time. I hung up and sat very still in my kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, and then went quiet. My hands were flat on the table and I watched them as if they belonged to someone else. Here's what I understood, all at once, sitting there. Mark was still, technically, on record as a partial owner of my house. Because our refinance hadn't fully closed, someone had used that narrow window to try to pull a large sum of cash out against the property, using a signature that was not mine, notarized by someone willing to look the other way. And that same general stretch of weeks, my own son had been asked to look through my office, track who visited, and report the very second I mentioned a lawyer. This wasn't spying anymore, if it had ever really been just that. This was a plan. And Eli, my sweet, dinosaur-obsessed, hamster-terrified 8-year-old, had been pulled into it, without the faintest idea what he was actually helping with. I wish I could tell you that was the worst of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I called my divorce attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Alvarez who had gotten me through the settlement 2 years earlier without ever once losing patience with me. I told her everything, the whisper at bedtime, the strange questions over the past few months, the phone call from the lending company. Part of me expected her to tell me to slow down, that there was probably some innocent explanation. She didn't. She went quiet for a second, and then said, "Rachel, I need you to write down everything you just told me, in as much detail as you can remember, with dates if you have them, today, before any of it gets fuzzy." That was the moment I understood I wasn't overreacting. Patricia walked me through what came next, piece by piece. First, I needed to contact the lending company's fraud department directly, in writing, to formally dispute the application and request every document tied to it. Second, I needed to file a police report, because forging a signature on a financial application isn't a family court issue, it's a criminal one. Third, and she was firm about this part, I was not under any circumstances to coach Eli on what to say or ask him leading questions about his father. If this ever ended up in front of a family court judge, and Patricia was fairly confident it would, any hint that I had shaped his story could be used to undercut every word of it. I could ask him soft, open questions. I could not ask him to remember more than he actually remembered. That was hard to sit with. Every instinct in me wanted to pull my son onto my lap and get every last detail out of him in one long conversation, the way you want to clean a wound thoroughly so it doesn't fester. Instead, over the following weeks, I let things surface naturally in small pieces, almost always at bedtime, in the same quiet voice I'd used that first night. I learned that Eli hadn't actually found much of anything. For his dad, he'd told him, honestly, that I didn't really have visitors besides my sister Jenna, and that one time a delivery truck had dropped off a new couch. I learned his father had gotten frustrated with him more than once for not paying good enough attention, and that the frustration had scared him, made him try harder, which was its own small heartbreak to hear secondhand. I learned that his dad had met, at least once, with a man in a nice car who had papers with my name on them in a parking lot near his apartment, while Eli sat in the back seat pretending to color and not listen, the way kids do when they know something important is happening and they are not supposed to understand it. I called my sister Jenna that same week, mostly because I needed to say the whole thing out loud to a person who wasn't a lawyer or a police officer, someone who would just be horrified alongside me instead of building a case. She was quiet on the phone for a long moment, and then she said the thing I think I needed most to hear from someone who loved us both. He used Eli Ratch. Whatever else is going on with the money, he used your kid. Having someone else say it plainly, without softening it, helped more than I expected it to. Jenna drove over that night with a bottle of wine neither of us drank, and sat with me at the kitchen table while I went over the timeline again, as if saying it enough times might make it less real. I also got Eli in to see a child therapist, a warm, steady woman named Dr. Foster, who specialized in kids navigating family upheaval. I didn't do it to build a case, though it ended up mattering for exactly that reason later. I did it because my son had spent months carrying a secret he didn't understand, torn between two parents, and I could see it sitting on him like a backpack full of rocks he was too little to be carrying. The first time we walked into her office, Eli held my hand tighter than usual. Dr. Foster couldn't share the specifics of their sessions, but she told me enough that Eli was showing real signs of anxiety, that he blamed himself a little for not doing a good enough job for his dad, and that in her professional opinion, what he'd experienced met the definition of emotional manipulation of a child by a parent, plainly and clinically. She recommended we keep the sessions going, and I agreed without hesitation. There was one Friday in the middle of all of this when Mark's regular weekend was still scheduled to happen because Patricia had been clear that I needed to keep following our existing custody order right up until any judge changed it, no matter how badly I wanted to cancel it myself. I remember standing in the driveway that afternoon with my stomach in knots, watching Eli climb into his dad's car with his backpack, the dinosaur keychain swinging from the zipper. I wondered if Mark somehow already knew I was onto him. Before he got in, I crouched down and told Eli, as simply as I could, that if his dad ever asked him about my office or my papers or any lawyers again, all he ever had to say was, "I don't want to play that game anymore." Not a lie, not a script, just the plain truth, handed to him like a life vest. He came home Sunday night, looking lighter than he had in weeks, and told me, unprompted, that Dad hadn't brought any of it up at all that whole weekend. I hugged him longer than usual and tried not to think about what it cost him to carry that boundary alone. Meanwhile, the lending company's fraud unit confirmed what I'd already started to suspect. The notary listed on the application either didn't hold a valid license or had one that had lapsed over a year earlier. The employment information listed under my name was wrong, an old job I'd left 3 years before, and the contact number listed as mine wasn't my number at all. Patricia sat with that last detail for a long moment before saying what I was already starting to think myself. He wanted any verification call routed to a number he controlled. He just didn't count on the company mailing a letter to the actual property address instead, since that's what's on the deed. I filed the police report that same week. A detective named Reyes from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit picked up the case. That was when I learned exactly how much bigger this whole thing really was. Detective Reyes was patient in a way that made me trust her. Almost right away, we sat across from each other at a plain table in an office off Beatty's Ford Road, going through my timeline point by point. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. After about 20 minutes, she set her pen down and told me something that reframed everything I thought I understood about my ex-husband. Mark wasn't just chasing one HELOC. He was drowning. Through financial records the fraud unit had already started pulling. Detective Reyes had learned that Mark had sunk close to $90,000 into a friend's failed car customization business 2 years before our divorce. Money he'd borrowed against credit lines and a private loan I never once knew existed, hidden from me the entire time we were still married. The arguments we'd had about money, toward the end, the ones I could never quite make sense of, suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. He hadn't been stressed about our household budget. He'd been quietly bailing water out of a boat that was already sinking, and he had never once told me there was a hole in it at all. I thought back to the nights he'd come home late, claiming overtime, the way he'd stare at his phone under the table at dinner, the sudden irritability when I asked about savings. All of it rearranged. itself into a different story. After the divorce, with those debts still very much alive and collectors closing in, Mark had apparently landed on one last opportunity, a house that had appreciated significantly since we bought it, still technically carrying his name for a few more months, and an ex-wife who had no reason to suspect him of anything. The HELOC would have handed him a large lump, some fast, against equity that was never supposed to be his. Again, he needed to move before my refinance shut that door permanently. And to move safely, he needed information. Was I suspicious? Was I talking to lawyers? Were there documents in my house that could tip him off or trip him up? That's where Eli came in. Not an afterthought, Detective Reyes told me gently, but the easiest source of information Mark had access to. A child doesn't need to be bribed with money or frightened into cooperating. He just needs to be told it's a game, or that it might bring his family back together, and he'll walk straight into his mother's private office with a camera in his hand and no idea in the world he's doing anything wrong. That stayed with me long after I left her office. It's one thing to be angry at an ex-husband for trying to steal from you. It's an entirely different, much deeper kind of anger to understand he was willing to use your shared child as the tool to do it. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel and the radio off, replaying every drop-off conversation, every casual question. Every time I'd answered honestly because I still believed we were co-parenting in good faith. Detective Reyes told me the fraud unit had already identified the notary, a man named Greg Sutton, a former acquaintance of Mark's from a weekly poker game whose license had lapsed over a year earlier following an unrelated complaint. They believed he'd taken a few $100s in cash to stamp a document he knew wasn't legitimate. They just didn't have quite enough yet to make charges against Mark Stick, not without more. We need him talking, she told me. Carefully, legally, and not through your son. Patricia and Detective Reyes worked out a plan together that ended up being simpler than I expected, which somehow made it feel more manageable instead of less. North Carolina is what's called a one-party consent state, meaning I was legally allowed to record a phone call with Mark as long as I was a participant in it myself. I didn't need to trick him into some elaborate confession. I just needed to talk to him on an ordinary pretext and let him talk. The pretext came easily because it was real. Eli's school was hosting its spring showcase the following Thursday, the kind of event where every kid plays 2 anticlimactic minutes of recorder music in the gym while parents sit on folding chairs and try not to check their phones. Mark and I needed to sort out who was picking Eli up and when. I called him on a Tuesday evening, recorder app running, hands cold despite the warm kitchen, and asked the ordinary, boring question any co-parent asks another. Was he still planning to come Thursday? He said yes. We went back and forth about timing for a minute. Completely normal, completely mundane, and I almost let myself believe nothing useful was going to come of any of it. My voice stayed steady. I asked about the traffic on Independence. He complained about a construction detour. For a moment it felt like any other call. Then I mentioned, as casually as I could make my voice sound, that I'd gotten a strange letter in the mail from some lending company, something about a home equity line of credit. Wasn't that weird? Probably some kind of scam letter, right? The silence on the other end of the phone lasted maybe 3 seconds. It felt like 30. Yeah, Mark said finally, and his voice had changed, tighter. Faster than a second ago. Just ignore that. It's a mix-up. I'm already handling it. Don't worry about it. I asked him, still keeping my voice light, how he even knew what I was talking about before I'd said anything specific about it at all. There was another pause, longer this time, and then, in a voice that had stopped even trying to sound casual, he said the thing I don't think he ever meant to say out loud to me, not ever. Because I needed a little help, okay? I'm drowning over here. And you got the house and I got nothing, and I was going to pay it back before anybody even noticed, I swear to God. Rachel, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I asked him, very quietly, if Eli had anything to do with it. He didn't answer that question. He hung up instead. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone still warm in my hand. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry without holding any of it back, because I finally had, in his own voice, on tape, a man admitting he'd needed a little help from money that was never his against a house that was never his anymore. During the exact stretch of weeks he'd asked our 8-year-old son to help him get it. The recording captured every shift in his tone, every hesitation, every hurried justification. I saved it, carefully labeled it, and sent it to Patricia and Detective Reyes. The same night that recorded call mattered, Detective Reyes told me a few days later, but it wasn't a smoking gun entirely on its own. A decent defense attorney could argue Mark was talking about some other kind of help, some other debt entirely. What actually closed the case was Greg Sutton. Once detectives brought him in over his lapsed notary license and the fraudulent HELOC stamp, Greg didn't hold out very long. Facing his own charges for false notarization, he told them everything. That Mark had approached him at a bar off Sunset Road 2 months earlier. That Mark had brought old paperwork with my real signature on it, saved from our marriage, a joint tax return, an old refinance document, and asked Greg to make it work on a new form. That Mark had paid him $300 in cash to stamp an application he knew perfectly well I had never seen, let alone signed. Greg even still had text messages from Mark saved on his phone. Careless little texts neither of them ever imagined a detective would read one day, one of which simply said, "You good for Friday," same as we talked about, sent the afternoon before the application was filed. Between the recorded phone call, Greg's statement, the text messages, and the forensic handwriting analysis the fraud unit ran, comparing my real signature against the one on the application, genuinely close, Detective Reyes admitted, closer than she'd expected, which was its own quiet, sickening kind of compliment to how carefully Mark had practiced it. The case against him was, in her words, about as solid as financial fraud cases get. I asked her, almost embarrassed to say it out loud, whether any of this was going to matter for custody. She looked at me for a second like the question surprised her. "Rachel," she said, "he used your son to help commit a felony against you. This isn't just a fraud case anymore." Mark was arrested on a Wednesday morning at the apartment off North Tryon on charges of forgery and attempted financial fraud. Greg Sutton was charged separately over the false notarization, though his cooperation with detectives ultimately worked in his favor at sentencing. I didn't feel triumphant when Patricia called to tell me. Mostly I felt tired and sad in a way I hadn't expected, thinking about the version of Mark I'd married. At 23, the one who used to fall asleep on the couch with baby Eli on his chest, the one who had somehow, over years I hadn't fully seen, ended up here instead. I thought about the early years, the camping trips, the late-night talks, about what kind of parents we wanted to be, the way he used to make up ridiculous stories to get Eli to eat his vegetables. Somewhere along the way that man had disappeared, or maybe he'd always been capable of this and I'd simply never looked closely enough. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Facing the recording, Greg's statement, the texts, and the handwriting analysis, Mark's attorney negotiated a plea. He pled guilty to forgery and attempted fraud, avoiding active prison time in exchange for 5 years of probation, a permanent felony record, mandatory financial counseling, and full restitution, covering the lending company's investigation costs and my legal fees. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom showdown you see in movies. It was a fairly quiet hearing in a Mecklenburg County courtroom, fluorescent lights, the low hum of an old air system, Mark in an ill-fitting gray suit I didn't recognize, not once looking over at me the whole time. I sat in the back row with Patricia and watched the process unfold in careful, Procedural language that somehow made the whole thing feel both smaller and more permanent at once. The custody case was where things got harder and where Eli, thankfully, was protected the most. Patricia filed an emergency motion to modify custody based on the fraud case and more. Specifically, on the emotional manipulation Eli had been put through. A guardian ad litem, a calm older man named Mr. Whitfield, was appointed to represent Eli's interests, independently of either parent. He met with Eli several times, once at Dr. Foster's office and once at our kitchen table, never once making my son feel like he was in trouble or being interrogated. He reviewed Dr. Foster's clinical notes alongside the police and fraud investigation records. I watched from the doorway the afternoon Mr. Whitfield sat at our table with a notebook and a quiet voice, asking Eli about school and baseball and what made him feel safe. Eli answered carefully, looking at me for reassurance now and then. I nodded and stayed silent, the way Patricia had coached me. I wasn't in the room the day Mr. Whitfield and Judge Halloran spoke with Eli directly, briefly, and gently in the judge's chambers instead of an open courtroom, a small mercy. Patricia told me the court almost always tries to extend to young kids in cases like ours. I only know secondhand that Eli told the judge in his own simple words that his dad had asked him to keep secrets from his mom, that it had made him feel yucky in my stomach, and that he loved them both but didn't want to play spy games anymore. Judge Halloran's written ruling used a phrase I've thought about many times since. She wrote that a parent enlisting a minor child without his knowledge or informed understanding as an instrument in a financial fraud scheme against the other parent, while dangling that child's own hope for family reconciliation as an incentive, constituted a serious and specific form of emotional harm, separate from, and in addition to the underlying criminal conduct. She granted me full physical and legal custody. Mark's time with Eli was reduced to supervised visitation through a family visitation center, with the possibility of expanding it only after he completed a court-ordered parenting program and could show, over time, that he understood exactly why what he'd done was harmful. I didn't feel like celebrating even then. I felt like I could finally exhale. That night, I made Eli's favorite dinner, chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, because some traditions are too important to abandon, and we watched a movie on the couch with the lights low. He fell asleep halfway through with his head against my shoulder. I stayed there long after the credits rolled, listening to him breathe, grateful for the ordinary weight of him against me. That was almost 2 years ago now. Eli is 10 these days, all elbows and opinions, obsessed with his travel baseball team instead of dinosaurs, though there's still a small stuffed stegosaurus living on his bookshelf that he'd never admit he sleeps a little better with nearby. He sleeps through the night now. He asks questions like any other 10-year-old about video games, about why the Panthers can't seem to catch a break, about whether he can get a real phone for real, mom, not a spy phone, and every time he makes that joke, dark as it sounds out loud, I take it as a good sign, proof that he's found a way to hold what happened without it holding him. We've talked about it enough that the sharp edges have worn smoother. He knows what his father did. He knows it wasn't his fault. He knows he can always tell me the truth. Dr. Foster still sees him occasionally, though we've stretched their sessions out to once a month instead of weekly. She tells me his anxiety symptoms have all but disappeared, that he talks about the whole ordeal now the way kids eventually talk about a scary movie they watched once, a little wide-eyed still, but from a safe distance. Sometimes he draws pictures of the two of us at the ballpark or walking for ice cream. Sometimes he draws nothing at all and just talks about school. Both feel like progress. Mark completed his probation requirements and the court-ordered parenting classes. His visits with Eli still happen, supervised twice a month at a family visitation center on a quiet street near South End, and from what the supervisors tell me, They've slowly gotten warmer over time. Board games, easy conversation, Mark asking about the baseball season, instead of anything else. I don't know if he'll ever get back to unsupervised time with his son, and some days I have complicated feelings about whether I even want that for him. I've made peace with letting that be Eli's story to write as he gets older, rather than mine to control out of old anger. When Eli comes home from those visits, he usually wants a snack and a quiet hour with his tablet. Sometimes he talks about them, sometimes he doesn't. I don't push. As for me, I still live in the house in Dilworth, the one that was never supposed to be up for grabs in the first place. My office door stays open most of the time now, not because I'm hiding anything, but because I don't need to hide anything from anyone, including my own son. The refinance finally closed, months after the arrest. The house is fully mine, the way the settlement always intended. Some nights I still walk through the rooms after Eli is asleep and touch the door frames, the windowsills, the ordinary solid things that almost became someone else's leverage. If you're waiting for some tidy lesson about villains and heroes, I don't have one, because Mark was never really a villain out of a movie. He was a desperate, frightened man who made an unforgivable choice about how to use his own child. What I learned is smaller than that, and I think about it more often. When your kid whispers something strange to you at bedtime, something that doesn't quite make sense yet, you don't laugh it off and move on. You lean in. You ask one more question and then another, gently, patiently, for as long as it takes. Because sometimes the smallest, quietest sentence a child ever says to you is the one carrying the most weight, and you will never regret taking it seriously. You will only ever regret not listening closely enough, soon enough. I listened. It saved us both,